In a world where Twitter leads the headlines and the 24-hour news cycle forces people to choose sides, we're here to help you cut through the noise and discover that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Hosted by entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and regular media contributor Seth Denson. Subscribe, share, rank, and review. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle on the Real News Communication Network.
Welcome back, everybody. Another Monday. Another episode of Somewhere in the Middle. Episode 13. Lucky number 13 today. Maybe. Maybe. We were talking before the show today. I am really nervous about today's show. And we'll get into that here in just a second. I have never been more nervous about doing a show than I am about today's show. I'm sure there will be another show coming down the road that I'll be more nervous about, but not today. As a matter of fact, I was discussing with Jenna this morning. We were both up really early, and we got to visit a little bit. Today's our anniversary, by the way, so I'll start off by saying happy 13th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
To my wife. So our 13th episode today on Somewhere in the Middle. My wife and I's 13th wedding anniversary. And so a special shout out to Jenna today. We actually wanted Jenna to come on the show with us today. Andrew and I were both talking to her about possibly coming on the show, and she had agreed, but she also, Emerson is in school and needed to be picked up, and she has mommy duties, and unfortunately we just couldn't get the calendars aligned, and so we're going to have Jenna on the show. I really wanted her on today's show because of the topic. So unless you're living under a rock, we're undergoing some confirmation hearings in the Supreme Court. And it was a big week in the news this past week on some allegations that have come out against Judge Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, and it has started a firestorm in the United States. And depending on where you get your information and which side of the political aisle you tend to lean, you have already cast your lot on this in most cases. And so we're going to take that on today. I was talking to Jenna about it this morning, and her words of advice: tread lightly, young grasshopper. Be careful about what you say and what you comment on. And I've got thoughts on this. And I want to be careful because I also want to be cognizant in the fact that I'm a guy. And so it seems almost, we were talking about just a minute ago, we really should have had other folks in this room that could speak to potential sexual assault and what goes on in the world and all of that today. And unfortunately, just because of timing, we couldn't get anybody else on the episode. I think nobody else wanted to take this one on, except for Scott Snellings.
Yes.
So our resident attorney, Scott Snellings of Snellings Law. Scott, thanks for coming back on the show with us today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite back for this show.
I know,
I
right?
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was careful to invite Scott back, but not tell him necessarily everything that we would be talking about today until he had agreed to come back on the show.
Exactly.
But listen, we had you on episode 2 and 3 both.
That's correct, yes.
Because we took on the Supreme Court. This is when we found out that Kennedy was stepping down. And so it was going to be it was a good conversation. We had Matt Bowers on the show. By the way, we invited Matt back to this show. Matt sent his regards. Unfortunately, could not reschedule some things that he had already going on. Otherwise, he would have been on the show, and we'll have him back on as well. But that was before we knew who the nominee would be. We had some ideas.
Right. Yeah, I think, well, I know Brett Kavanaugh was one of the names that we had talked about, and I think he was actually put up as the nominee a couple of days after that show aired.
Right. And so, I mean, listen, as is the case in all the world, when somebody puts out a nominee or on anything, all the dirt's coming out some way, somehow. So we didn't know a lot about Brett Kavanaugh in those days, except for kind of his past positions in the Bush 43 White House, and obviously his positions on the federal court out of the D.C. circuit. And so, but now we're learning more, or are we? And that's really what I want to make sure that we talk about today, because it was interesting. So I was out of the country this past week, left town, and the 2 news stations that I got in my room each day were Fox News and MSNBC.
So you heard pretty much the same story, right?
Boy, howdy. Andrew and I were talking about this on the way up here. They were one station apart on the television where I was. And so if I flipped up, it was Fox, and I flipped down, it was MSNBC. And so I literally and the only thing they were talking about until the Rosenstein potential statement on the New York Times article about recording the president and invoking the 25th Amendment. We won't get into that one today, but we may get into that one in a future episode. Everything was about Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford and the accusation and what's going on and he said, she said. But what was interesting was there were facts given on each of the stations that were not given on the other. And they were intentionally given or not given based on the narrative that they were trying to put out there. And so I intentionally would go back and forth from one to the other to just hear. And then I changed my mind. And one night I stayed up literally all night. Through the night, did not go to sleep watching this because it was mesmerizing to see how different the points of view were on this deal. And so for 1 hour, I watched MSNBC and only MSNBC. And I will tell you, your mind starts to, oh my gosh. And then you flip to Fox, and for an hour, you're going, oh my gosh. And they were two polar opposites on this deal. And I got to thinking about this a lot. And I was really saddened by it. I found myself almost in a state of depression after doing this.
Well, you were up all night long watching politics.
That didn't help either. About somebody's life's ruined by this deal, regardless. Either Dr. Ford's life is ruined because of what happened to her 30-plus years ago and that now is in the light of day and she's going to live with that, or Brett Kavanaugh's life is ruined because of either A, something he did, or B, something that he did not do. And it doesn't matter. Because if I only tune into one news station, I'm only getting their opinion on what they want me to believe.
Right.
And now I have tried the case in my own mind. I have found him guilty or not guilty depending on where I got my information. And I'm done. And I've moved on. And so what I wanted to do today is I want to talk about this. And I want to be careful. I'm going to take the advice from my beautiful wife on treading lightly. I am not going to cast disparagement on anyone today. Here's what I want today's show to be about. I want to look at this from both sides of this deal. And I want to have a conversation about due process in our country today. Along with me on this fun ride, and Zach, you put the disclaimer up before the show,
I did,
right?
yeah.
I thought it looked bigger today.
I saw something flashing in the background too. Was that it?
May have been. It's a strobe effect.
It was
today.
so much they even brought Anna in to change the lights in the studio.
Yes,
because it was almost like they needed this to look different than any other episode we've done before. Like we got to change this up.
So yeah, just delete the green one.
Yeah,
perfect.
So I think the safest bet is for all of us not to talk and just let Zach take it from here.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's hang me out to dry. I let myself hang me out to dry. Yeah.
And so and always we have the great and talented and intelligent Andrew Clark with us.
Thank you. Good
looking
to be
dapper
here.
today.
Yeah.
As always. And so let's take this on. Scott, you're an attorney.
Yes, I am.
What? So have you ever tried a case where only the prosecution or only the defense got to talk?
No, but I would love to try a case where only the plaintiff got to talk. That would be a dream case for me.
Talk to me about this.
Yeah, no. So it's funny. I've sat through hundreds of trials, and it's funny because as the plaintiff in a civil case or as the prosecutor in a criminal case, you get to go first. You also get to go last. All right. So one of the things during voir dire jury selection that the defense always does is they question the jury on, hey, can you listen to both sides of the story, right? I think a lot of us have a tendency to listen to the first half of the story, and all of a sudden our minds are made up, and we're turning it off. We already have our minds made up, so clearly whatever the other side says is bogus. So that's one of the main problems that we like to address during voir dire, not me specifically, but that defense attorneys like to address during voir dire is, can you listen to both sides? Because you're going to hear their side completely first, and then you're going to hear from us. So if you can't sit there with your minds made up, then you probably aren't going to be a very good juror. So, yeah, it's an issue that we address in every single jury trial.
So it came out over the weekend, this past weekend, I should say a week ago, this whole thing, right? This is kind of when it hit Newswire. 11th hour deal. Dianne Feinstein apparently been sitting on a letter for a while. Let's start there. Again, she's coming out saying, I wanted to respect the wishes of Dr. Ford, who did not want her name out there. We still don't know who leaked the name.
Right.
Again, depending on where you get your information, you've got your own speculation. But my question from a Dianne Feinstein perspective is, I mean, is there any doubt that this was, at least from her perspective, the timing of this was political?
Man, I think you have to be pretty naive to say no.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, I'm not... come on. I mean, you waited till right before the vote goes down, right before the committee approved, and they were going to approve because the Republicans have, I mean, and then that was going to go to a vote, right?
Right.
11th hour. Here's the Hail Mary.
Yeah, the old October surprise, right?
That's right.
Right. Like, the coincidences happen, but the timing is very coincidental, I guess. That's...
Yeah, shouldn't, I mean, again, and not knowing again, I want to, wasn't there when Dianne Feinstein received this letter and made any commitments to Dr. Ford about, I won't put this out there. Obviously, she put it out there. Didn't she have a responsibility, though, to go to the other committee members and saying, I'm not going to give you details on this, but I have received something, and I'm going to omit the name. But we need to probably think about, again, if you want this to be a true investigation and not a political tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I think she absolutely does. If you have information like that on somebody who is up to be your next Supreme Court justice, regardless of the victim's wishes necessarily, you've got to report this. If the victim wants to come forward, then she can come forward. But the fact that you have a letter from a victim specifically alleging that a Supreme Court nominee has sexually assaulted her, I mean, you have to present that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
Yeah. Guys, any other thoughts on that? Andrew, what are your thoughts on this?
As far as the release of the letter goes, it's absolutely political. If it had been a Republican who had the letter and released it at the last second, maybe hoping to get by it, then I could buy that it wasn't political and they were putting it out for the good of the country. But because it came from where it did,
it's got stank all over it, as my granddad would say.
I'm reminded of, and this is a whole other conversation, I'm reminded of James Comey and his release of I forget how exactly it went down, but leading up to the 2016 election, just a few days before. Yes, I'm reminded of that and how he talks about that after the fact and says, I didn't know what to do, whether or not it was right or wrong, whether or not I should say something or shouldn't say something, whether or not it could influence an election. I don't know what the result of that was, and I guess none of us really know what the answer was, but just like that, I get the same feeling when it's like, just odd. The timing is strange, and that's worth having a conversation about.
Right, so this letter ends up on Dianne Feinstein's desk, right, from a constituent. Is there any doubt in anybody's mind that she was ever going to hold on to that letter and let him get appointed?
No.
Ever.
I mean, you
mean without it coming out?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, in a way, you'd hope not, right? You would hope this is something that is addressed in some fashion, just not.
Here's what I hope. Again,
absolutely,
we can try. We can Monday morning quarterback the heck out of this thing. Sure. But when you receive that, you read it. She is the highest ranking Democrat on the committee. You would think you would immediately go to Chuck Grassley and say, "I received this." I think it behooves us to do some type of investigation or go to the White House and have them request the investigation because this warrants, especially in the climate that we are in right now, this warrants looking into.
Sure.
And that letter apparently was put on our desk in June or July. Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think
that's right.
A long time ago.
And question for the
July.
lawyer in the room: when the opposition receives evidence, do you not have to present it to the defense of, hey, we have this? I mean, it's got kind of a similar.
Well, I mean, in a court of law, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a prosecutor has to present exculpatory evidence, right? Something that could show that the defendant did not do whatever he or she's alleged of doing. But in something like this, I have no idea what the Senate rules are on this kind of thing.
I don't know that there are any. Again, I don't either. But I mean, it's very clear this is not a trial.
But if you're telling me that, if she's trying to say this wasn't political, well, if it wasn't political, then you would have given up, I say, the opposition, the Republican Party. You would have given them a heads up in July, August. You know,
yeah. Again, if you get this in July, then even on your own, aren't you trying to investigate this and find out there's credibility? There is nothing preventing me from writing a letter today saying that I was assaulted by Scott Snellings.
Absolutely. There's not.
Right? And so, again, when you've got something so high... I wasn't, by the way.
Let's put that on the record,
for
too.
the court.
Yeah, I want to
Until
be careful.
the bill
Somebody's
shows
going to
up.
cut that snippet out.
No, nobody would do that in today's atmosphere.
That'll
I know,
be me. Yeah.
right?
At my judicial confirmation hearing?
Right, exactly. Yeah. But you know, again, because it's my word against theirs, and so, as is the case in everything, you've got to investigate it to find out is this accurate. And you know, the challenging part of all this too, though, is because anybody can say anything at any time. Anybody can make an accusation. Out of the millions of people in the United States, and half of the people don't want Brett Kavanaugh to get confirmed because they fall on one side of the political aisle,
Right.
I'm sure we can find somebody out there that's had some interaction with him at some point. But then again, what if it did happen?
Well, and that's the scary part, right? I mean, what if it did happen? And, you know, sitting here as a guy, I have represented victims of sexual assault in my practice. And I can tell you that they were absolutely scared to death to report the crime. Scared to death of having to talk about it. Essentially, when you report it as a crime, you have to acknowledge that it happened, which a lot of people don't want to do. Now, I certainly don't want to sit here and talk like I've ever experienced anything like that. I haven't. I'm a guy. Not that guys aren't sexually assaulted as well. But when you go to the police, it becomes real. It becomes something that all of a sudden you're putting yourself out there, you're making these allegations, and people are going to start questioning you.
You know, and I thought that President Trump, throughout most of the week last week, showed amazing restraint.
Most of the week.
Most of the
Until-
week, yeah.
And then he has his moment where he doesn't. And to your point that you just mentioned, Scott, again, I've never experienced sexual assault. It was interesting when the whole Me Too movement came out, though, hearing stories from people that are very close to me, telling me their stories of assault that they never came out about.
Right.
And stuff that was every bit as bad as what Brett Kavanaugh is being accused of doing, if not worse.
Right.
For that reason, one, they felt victimized, but it was one of those that, what do you do in that moment? You know, I don't want to relive it. It's just one of the things I just want to forget. In some of the cases of people that were sharing with me their Me Too movement or their Me Too situation, it was, hey, you know what? I almost was very assaulted, but there's levels of assault, and yes, I was, you know, but it didn't happen. I wasn't actually raped, even though I was, you know, there were a number of things out there, but I wanted to be done. I wanted to move on from it. And so when the president came out and did his tweet, I'm shaking my head, going, "What? You were doing so good."
Yeah, he was.
Because guess what? You are her president, and you are my president, and you are Brett Kavanaugh's president. You're everybody's president. And to me, the father figure of the president of the United States should be that of, hey, if this is real, we need to find out that it was real. And if it's not, then shame on you. But at the end of the day, we got to look into this. And until all of the evidence is gathered and we are able to formulate an opinion on this, then maybe a 70-plus-year-old man in the White House who has lived a life of, well,
And been accused of quite a few.
shouldn't just immediately go, well, I'm sure a 14 or 15-year-old girl would have gone to the police. Really?
Yeah.
How can you even put yourself in a position like that?
Well, and just so people know what we're talking about, the tweet was something along the lines of, if it was as bad as she says, she would have filed charges at the time. Which it's just a ridiculous statement for anybody to make, much less the president. Because as any police officer who investigates sexual assaults will tell you, no, That's not the case.
Yeah.
People are violently sexually assaulted and raped and everything else under the sun and keep quiet about it, sometimes for years, sometimes for their entire lives. And they feel guilty. They feel like they had some sort of fault in the matter, that they contributed to that assault, when it's not at all true. But to sit there and to just make a global statement like that, it makes me sick to my stomach too.
Yeah, I thought it was very poor taste, you know, and I was really ashamed of it. And two, you got to remember the time of this. So right now in today's United States, the Me Too movement, this is the forefront of the news, and I think what I hope happens out of this whole Me Too movement and bringing this to light is that people that are victimized, male or female, feel empowered to come forth and say, I was victimized. That wasn't the case in the 80s.
No.
When this happened, or allegedly happened. Nor was it the case in the 90s or even a year ago, right? And so we live in an era today where I think that people might feel more empowered on either, you know, male or female, that feel like they've been assaulted in any way to come forth. But here's the next place I want to go with this. And I am treading lightly grasshopper on this. There's a lot of gray area in what might be considered inappropriate or not. Let's push aside Brett Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford's situation. Let's talk in general. Let's talk as dads, right?
Sure.
We're both dads. When I was in high school, right? Mom and Dad, if you're listening, sorry.
Uh-oh.
I think I mooned a few people, right? We did, my senior year, we did a late night skinny dipping thing at the town pool. There, I've just confessed to a crime, apparently, because I'm trespassing.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. No, it's not
No,
allegedly.
No, it's
It
allegedly,
isn't
sir.
that?
Oh, sorry.
It's allegedly.
Right.
You misspoke, everyone. You misspoke.
I know,
Oh,
right?
gosh.
But I mean, it's seriously. This is. I mean, but it's funny because I remember there's a big group of us did it, but it was the guys were on one side of the pool, the girls were on the other side. I was like, let's just do this. Let's do it quick. Get out, say we did it.
Right.
Perception, though,
Now, 30 or 20 years later.
was there something there? I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm not asking you guys to confess to anything you did in high school, but or college or anything like that. And again, I am separating assault. I am separating the act of forcibly trying to put yourself in a position of power over somebody for any reason, sexual nonetheless. There are things, though, that college kids do. Listen, you turn on college football on Saturday, somebody's streaking across the field, right?
Right.
I mean, we all laugh about it and we joke about it, but if there's 100,000 people in the stands and one person now says, that was assault on me and I'm out.
Well, because you've now exposed yourself to a child, you can end up on the sex offenders list.
Exactly.
For that.
And again, I'm not saying I've never streaked. Okay, I've done that. You know, but you're sitting there going, is this something now that are we going to start litigating this in the court of public opinion over stuff? Because that's two new people came out today, right? Or at least one.
Deborah
yeah.
Ramirez.
Saying that he exposed himself to her
At a dorm party at Yale. Yes.
at a dorm party at Yale. However, there's details that are fuzzy to her, so much so that I think the New Yorker who broke the story came out initially and said, hey, we're giving you this story, but we can't corroborate it, right? We're not. That was at least my understanding this morning at 4:30 when I heard about it initially.
Yeah, my understanding is she alleged 3 guys were actually in there when this happened, and I believe that the 2 other guys have said, no, I don't know what she's talking about. I could be wrong on that, but that was before we walked in here, I was trying to read up on it, and that's my understanding. At least one of them has said never happened, wouldn't ever think he would do something like that.
Yeah.
But of course, you're talking about someone who's being accused of a crime,
Absolutely.
denying the
Yep.
crime.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. And with these kinds of things, if you don't have corroboration, then it's a he said, she said, right?
Yep.
And that's difficult. How do you ever find out what really happened, especially when it's 30
years ago?
That's right. And you may not.
No.
And so the question becomes, well, even if there was a potential, should we appoint this guy to the Supreme Court? Now, I'm coming back full circle to this
Right.
situation specifically. Well, does it mean we just cut the guy off because somebody said that he did something? Again, I'm not saying that he did or didn't. I'm just saying.
I have a clarification question, again, for the lawyer. Is there a statute of limitations on sexual crimes?
Depends on where you are. So
for what he's accused of
which
kind of
happened in
exposing
Maryland.
herself.
Yeah.
Himself,
So-
excuse me.
Yeah, I believe I actually read something this morning that Maryland does not have a statute of limitations, where they've repealed statute of limitations on any kind of assault-based offense, or maybe it's a sexual assault-based offense. So the answer on that, if that's the case, would be no. They could prosecute him for that.
Again, I'm not the attorney, but I was reading something very similar to that. But there is specifics to the actual assault.
Okay.
The part that I read on that was that is true, that there is no statute of limitations, but there is specifics to the actual assault. So there has to be physical rape, I think, is what I read on that. Now, again, I don't know. But to that point, yeah, every state has their own deal. Again, this isn't right now. We're not in a criminal phase of this,
No, we are not at all.
but we are absolutely in the court of public opinion.
And in fact, the FBI has even said, hey, look, we don't have jurisdiction over this. This is something that happened in Maryland. There's no federal issue here. Now, could the president instruct them to do an investigation? I mean, he's the head of the executive branch.
But it wouldn't be a criminal investigation,
No,
right?
it would not be.
more
It
just
would be an information gathering,
Yeah.
right? And then they're not going to sit there and say, well, we believe she's credible or he's credible. They're just going to probably do a couple interviews, kind of like what happened in the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill investigation, and basically say, here you go. Here's the transcripts.
Yeah, and so this brings up the other point where I was kind of starting to go with this, because guilt can be about the perceiver, the perceived, or the actuality, right? And where I'm going with this is, where do we get to the point, or do we get to the point where there are lines drawn on what is and isn't appropriate? Again, no question, you force yourself on anybody, male or female, that's inappropriate, and that's wrong. But where I fear we're going with this is, and again, this is Brett Kavanaugh, but let's fast forward. Let's fast forward. When we were kids, we didn't have Twitter pages or Facebook pages or social media this or video recorders on our devices that we carried 24/7 in our pockets.
Right.
Can something as simple as what would have been considered
Offensive, but not necessarily criminal.
Yeah. So I talked about the skinny dipping thing. Kids go skinny dipping. They do that. Now all of a sudden, fast forward 30 years, and they expose themselves.
So there's that. There's a YouTuber in Britain who taught his dog to sig heil, and he was found to have violated essentially an obscenity act in doing so, and was prosecuted for that and found guilty. Now, I would say that if that happened at a party and you came in and somebody, hey, watch what my dog does, it's like, oh, that's tasteless. And you might then have a negative opinion of that person or tell them, you're an idiot. Why'd you teach your dog to do that? Or if you found it funny, whatever. But that's the kind of thing that would be handled on a kind of one-on-one level. But now you're talking about what was offensive has now been criminalized.
Mm-hmm.
And bear with me where I'm going on this.
Yeah.
So what I'm worried about, for example, in your example, you did something dumb as a teenager, that while everyone was consensual in this event, it might have been in poor taste, depending on whom you're talking to. Can you now be criminally penalized for something retroactively that was at the time, I don't want to say acceptable, but it was okay? You know what I'm saying? And that's a really scary place that we could be headed.
And that's my, again, what do you listen? Yeah. Tell my kids, hey, don't just be smart. Put yourself in smart situations. Don't make dumb decisions. But kids are also going to be kids.
Right.
Anybody ever see every movie about college that's out there right now? There's somebody streaking or something. Yeah, that's right.
Gosh.
That's what I was thinking, Animal House, or what was the Old School? I mean, there's something
Revenge
going on.
Revenge of the Nerds.
That's exactly right. You're going, oh yeah, well that's probably not the smartest thing in the world, but they're kids and they're being dumb, and this is the way. I mean, again. I'm putting aside this Kavanaugh issue. I'm just saying that are we headed to a place where fast forward 20, 30 years, somebody that was there that saw this dumb, stupid thing, assuming no actual assault happened, right, can come out and say, well, I felt victimized by it. Again, I know that we're a bunch of guys around in a room talking about this.
But it could be one of the guys saying, well, I got pressured into doing this. You know, well,
But where I'm going with this is where do we get to the, and again, we may never get there, but what do I tell my kids about when they go to school and make their own dumb decisions, that they weren't trying to assault anybody, they're just being dumb kids.
Right.
But that could come back and haunt you later, because when I was doing dumb stuff, nobody had a video camera or a Twitter feed or a Facebook post.
Yeah, and you talked about earlier, how do you look at things as a dad now, right?
Yeah.
As a 17, 18-year-old kid, things seem funny, maybe, right?
Sure.
That now you look back and think, wow, if somebody were to said that to my daughter or done that around my daughter, I'd want to knock their block off.
Yep.
Right? And so your perspective changes over time. You grow up, right? I'm a completely different person than I was back in high school.
Sure.
Completely different person. I would imagine most of us are.
yes.
I would hope most of us are, right? Because I knew a bunch of idiots in high school. And so I think there's also the aspect of how long do you hold somebody's indiscretions against them when you can tell that they've changed, they've matured, they're a family person. And I'm not speaking about Kavanaugh directly whatsoever.
Right. Just in general.
Just in general.
And that's
Yeah.
where this whole episode, I want to be very clear. Again, I've disclaimered it at the front end. I'm disclaiming it now. I'm talking about where we are as a society, because this is coming to the light. Effectively, what we are doing is saying that everything you've done in your entire life now is going to be in the public eye for interpretation, regardless.
So if I may, and this is going to get risky for me here, let's say he exposed himself and to the second woman. Again, I don't know enough about Ford because she hasn't testified yet, but let's say he exposed himself and was sexually inappropriate while he was in college. Does that mean that he can't be the Honorable Brett Kavanaugh, as he is known today? He's a judge. He's the Honorable Kavanaugh. Does that mean he can't be a good Supreme Court judge because of something dumb he did in his teens? I'm not saying that we can't judge him for it, like, hey, that was stupid and you did this, what is essentially a crime. Well, it's not essentially, it is a crime if it's true. But yeah, how far back can you change? Like,
we keep morphing here. So last week's episode, we talked about marijuana, right? I remember growing up watching the Clinton campaign trying to deny that he ever inhaled.
Yeah.
Right? And today's world, we all go, you didn't inhale, what,
loser.
What were you doing?
You were wasting it, right? So again, I think that perception has changed, but for a while there it was, well, if he ever did marijuana, he's not fit to be president.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever, streaked, or you ever skinny dipped, or you ever did any of those things, are you now no longer eligible for any office? Because I will tell you now, we've just eliminated likely 85, 90% of all potential candidates for anything, male or female.
Right.
Right? And so I think that we have to, again, where are the lines? That's what I'm trying to raise my children, and I'm trying to say, here are the lines. You can't cross them, period. Or there are dire consequences. And now I fear that what I'm getting to is, kids, if you're ever in the political eye, you're going to get hosed anyway.
Don't do it. Just don't ever become in the political eye, right?
Well, that's exactly right. We can never do it. It was inevitable. And by the way, let's fast forward 6 months. Or 6 days. And let's say that the Kavanaugh nomination gets pulled and Trump comes out with somebody else in 6 days, 7 days, 10 days, however long. There will be something found.
Of course there will.
Allegedly or not.
Everyone's got a skeleton.
Somebody's going to have something that was done that somebody felt they were, I gotta be careful with this.
This is brutal. Right. This is brutal.
But I'm struggling with this because now let's take this full circle. Let's say it didn't happen.
Okay.
He didn't do it. He never forced himself on anybody. This is all made up. And again, so we haven't heard testimony, but Dr. Ford has clearly said that she had repressed that memory, and through counseling, it came back, but only in, again, I'm getting all of this third hand. through whatever
Media.
outlet I got. Is it possible then that some of the facts of this thing are not real facts, that they are made up? Are they not? Did this ever
Or
happen?
misremembered, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we're talking about something 30 years ago, not 30 days ago, I mean, what clear memories do you have from 30 years ago where you would remember precise details of that evening, that day, that event?
Very little.
Even the most important events in your life
Well,
from 30 years ago.
I remember
right?
Nolan Ryan's 5,000th strikeout vividly. I remember where I was watching that on the day, but I don't remember what T-shirt I was wearing. I don't.
Who was sitting next to you
That's
necessarily.
right. These are.
I mean-
I'm giving some insight into the things that were really important to me when I was younger. But no, to your point, I don't know.
Right, but on the other side of that coin, and that is the point of this whole discussion, you would remember big events, you would remember traumatic events.
That's right.
Yes,
Which is
absolutely.
where we
That's
get
right.
stuck.
And that's the thing, and that's why this whole process of I'm anxious to for the testimony to happen. But here's something I want to throw out to you guys. Because of the politicalization of this entire thing, shouldn't there? This is, by the way, why we have a republic, not a democracy.
That mob mentality.
Could you imagine anything now where we had the citizenry getting to vote in us? We would never get anybody.
We would never get a vote on anything.
Yeah. But the second piece I wanted to go with this is, couldn't this all have been done behind closed doors? Why did it all have to be played out in the public before facts were given?
See, I have a question about that as well, because I've heard people say that on whichever news site, pundit, website you want. I've heard people say this should be played out in public. This deserves a public trial, and that's my question. Why?
Yeah, I don't.
Why public?
I don't either, because here's the thing: nobody wins. So
No.
let's say that let's play both sides of the coin. Let's say that Dr. Ford comes in and it becomes very obvious that either this was made up or it was an inaccurate memory or something, and that's all plays out on public television. We've now just humiliated this woman for the rest of her life and anybody that's associated with her. And then on the flip side, this all comes out, and Brett Kavanaugh. It's again, you just. Why couldn't this have played out behind closed doors? Why couldn't we have,
Can I ask?
Well, and here's the other. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. The other thing too is, I mean, we already saw what happened at the Anita Hill hearing, right? I
Yeah.
keep going back to this. I mean, she got excoriated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And so did he.
and so did he. Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody won in that deal.
No.
Which is why I still think to this day, if you ever listen to Spring, I'm interrupting, I apologize.
No.
Clarence Thomas doesn't say a word.
He said one thing, and that was after Scalia died.
That's right. And I don't. I think that is he is still in this situation after that. I think that anyway. Go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
But if I'm somebody who's been assaulted, once again, I'm a guy. Would I want to subject myself to that at a Supreme Court Judiciary Committee hearing?
Yeah.
No. It's hard enough for somebody who's been assaulted to come forward. To me, that just screams, "Hey, let's handle this in private, at least to begin with."
Yeah.
But here's the other thing: things get leaked, right? Allegedly, the whole reason that she came forward is because her letter, she originally wrote a letter that ended up on Feinstein's desk, got leaked to the press, and people were tracking her down. People had figured out who she was, and so she said, okay, well, I might as well come forward and tell my story as opposed to having them tell it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another aspect, is putting them through this public, public hearing. Is that gonna help in terms of other people who've been assaulted coming forth to the people that have assaulted them?
Yeah.
And then, and again, this is a devil's advocate question. All of this dialogue has been, by the way. So we'll all have our little disclaimers
Cover
today.
your bases.
So let's say she comes out and it's obvious that this happened, that when he was a young man, he was not a good person. Let's say that happens. Then what for his hearing? It's not like that prohibits him from becoming a Supreme Court judge. I'm again, devil's advocating here. Say she comes out and it's like, oh, wow, this sounds really compelling. He sounds like he assaulted her. Okay, well, there's still 52 Republicans that have a vote to confirm him if they want to confirm him. there isn't a criminal. This isn't a criminal proceeding. This is. This
Well,
is
no,
just
technically
information
you're
gathering.
right. I mean,
So-
technically they can still confirm
Yeah,
him,
absolutely.
and
So-
then
yeah.
I'm saying this, so that's why I'm like, this is kind of ugly, and yeah, what are we doing here? Because it's not like this is going to have an. I don't want to say not have an effect, but it seems strange.
I think the hope, right, is not. If it came out that this was true and this happened, the hope is not that he would be removed from a potential nomination because of what happened 30 years ago. It's because that he came out and directly denied it and said didn't happen.
and then he's
Stop down.
lying.
Yeah, right. And then
Quality of his character.
leading up to a
Credibility.
nomination where you are in this job forever because you are not supposed to have anything weigh on your decisions. You had this weigh on your decision. And like that would show that you are vulnerable to being,
Manipulated.
I guess, right? That's the theory.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
No, it is. I think so too. I think that listen, the Republicans, just like Democrats, are political. If this hearing happens and it happens in the public eye, and there is any inkling that this woman was telling the truth and this happened, Brett Kavanaugh's done.
I would hope so. I really would hope so.
They're not going to push it forth that going into the again. I hate saying that I'm being political about this, but going into the midterm elections, that
this
would
is
just be a
political.
nail in the coffin.
Right.
The other thing that I did want to talk about on this before I get into the last point, which we'll get into in just a second, but is I'll tell you, when all this broke, of course I immediately went, oh man, like regardless of your thoughts on Kavanaugh, I thought we were going to get through something without dirt.
You should know better than that.
I know. But when it came out, there were two sides of me. And again, I came down on both sides. Like, did he? And if he did, and then if he didn't, how we've gotten to a new low here. And here was the part that really frustrated me on this. And I'll tell you, and again, those of you who listen to this show enough know I am equally critical of both sides of the political aisle. I have given my past political leanings. I always used to say I'm a Republican, but the Republican Party left me. I didn't leave it. From a standpoint of where it is right now, I think again, it's the Trumponian Party. It's not the Republican Party. Okay. And that's frustrating to me. And because we've politicized everything so much, if I'm a Republican, I automatically have to just criticize Democrats, and I can't ever agree with them. And that's just, I thought when we, again, right or wrong, like him or not, when we lost John McCain, we lost a lot in somebody who is willing to say, hey, let's get together on this. That being said, when this whole Ford thing came out, and I'm hearing both sides of the story, and then I found out the list of demands that were going to be required for her to actually testify. So you make an accusation that is life-ending for someone from a public perception. Again, let's say this whole thing comes out and Kavanaugh's confirmed and that never comes out. There will be a subset of society that will never not believe that he wasn't a predator. His daughters will have to go to school and live with that over them for the rest of their life. If this is found out to be totally fabricated, it won't matter.
Yep.
And so I thought, in part of your mind, you're going, boy, where do you go with this? And then, is this being politicized? Is it not? And then you came out, and there were two things that happened. One is a number of senators on the Democratic side came out and said, I believe her. Have you even talked to her? And
They
it came out,
read her letter.
yeah. Wait a minute. Whoa. And then the next thing that came out was, we want to be accommodating. And I got to give Grassley some kudos on this. He offered up anything. Hey, so first they said, you need to let us know by Monday. And I get it. Listen, I'm sorry. We live in a timing here, and there is political sides to this. First of all, the Supreme Court goes back into session Monday. Mm-hmm. There's only 8 people in the Supreme Court. If we do have political divides, those things will go to the lower court ruling, right?
Yes.
Attorney?
We do.
And so the odds of us getting anything accomplished, it costs taxpayers money. It costs time. Again, I'm not making the argument that we shouldn't investigate this thing. I'm just giving you the details. This is why it was important to have this hearing. And if you've got a story to tell, Dr. Ford, come tell it. We are all ears. We want to hear it, and we'll afford you what you need. Great. So we want you here on Monday. Well, no. I'll be there on Thursday. Well, why? Well, I don't want to fly. I prefer driving. That was, I think, the response.
I did not hear that.
Yeah, I'd heard that response. Again, I could have been getting that secondhand. Not trying to project more false narratives here. But it needed to be Thursday to allow for time to get to D.C. And so then Grass said, well, we'll come to you. We'll fly the committee out to you. No, I'm not comfortable with that. And then it became, well, all right, we're going to have somebody not a senator conduct the hearing, questioning. No, we're not comfortable with that.
Without outside counsel.
Outside counsel. Well, that screams to me that they want this to be political because they want Republican senators to be seen going after this woman.
Right.
And then, one camera at one angle. It was. Listen. So it was funny. I used to work for a promotions company, and we did concerts for, rock stars, country stars, all that other stuff. And it was funny when we'd always get their list of contractual demands, like
gotta have M&Ms brown in the dressing room.
There it is.
That's exactly right. I want water at this temperature, this number of. That's when I saw the list of things that her attorney was trying to get required. It was going. They don't ever want this to happen. Mm-hmm. They want to make this so impossible it doesn't happen. It to me screamed political, and it really started to irk me. Again, if this happened to this woman, then let's hear it. And if she's not comfortable doing it, and I get it, if she's not, then do it behind closed doors, but let her tell her story. But when you start saying, well, there has to be this camera from this angle, and only these people ask the questions, and we want...
And he had to talk first, then
he had to talk first. It's like,
wait
a minute. Again, I know this isn't a trial, but you're making an accusation. And if this didn't happen, how am I supposed to defend something that never happened? And I don't know what you're going to say happened outside of what I got to hear about in a letter.
Right.
There's no way to defend that. That's why it is structured in a court of law that the defendant gets to go second after the prosecution has made its statements, right?
Yes.
So I'm really torn on this deal from a political perspective, and I think that if this is true, that the Democrats have mucked it up because they've cared more about the politics of it than the truth. And there's going to be plenty on the left that come at me on this and say, well, the Republicans are trying to, put these unrealistic constraints. No, but listen,
when you offer to fly a committee out and talk to you, that's a pretty big olive branch.
And now they've Thursday's fine.
Yeah.
We're allowed to be Thursday. Right. Anybody want to guess that this doesn't happen Thursday? Anybody want to take a bet? Take a
Vegas spread on this one?
Yeah, the over under 50%. I'd say it's not going to happen.
I'm taking the under on it. There's going to be something else that comes up that prevents this from happening, and maybe the second Hail Mary. Again, I'm getting into conspiracy theory here, and I want to avoid that on today's episode. Is these other people coming out, now they can say, well, wait a minute, we need to delay the Thursday. I actually already heard that this morning. We need to delay the Thursday hearing so that we can go talk to these people. Anybody want to guess that once they do that, next week somebody else is going to come out?
Well, and Stormy Daniels' attorney, why hasn't he released the story
Yeah, that
yet?
was the news. So we haven't talked about that. So he came out today now, and
he's got dirt.
Great. He no longer representing just Stormy Daniels. He's got somebody else, but he's not telling.
Avenatti 2020.
I mean,
it's got to be primetime, man. I'm not just going to give that up.
So, somebody asked me, shifting gears here. Somebody came to me that listens to the show and says, "Man, you ought to run for political office someday." and I went, okay. Even if I wanted to do, let's say that I wanted to serve the public in a way that I thought was going to be good,
an admirable thing.
I love my family too much to ever consider that. And along the way, I'm sure I've made a dumb decision, nothing to the point of,
assault.
Illegal from a standpoint of an assault. Yeah, but I've got my attorney here, so I've allegedly
I'm
probably
going to instruct you to stop talking, Seth.
Yeah, I know, right? Done something at some point that probably wasn't smart, even in the court of public opinion.
This
Why
episode, Exhibit A.
would I ever put my family through that? And so we are now putting people in a place where we're not going to end up with the best of the best on the Supreme Court or in public office, because why would they go through it?
Well,
And this carries down all the way to local elections, Seth. I mean, you and I live in McKinney, and our mayoral race got a little rough.
Yeah.
And that's a race for mayor of a city of a couple 100,000.
Yeah.
Not even.
Listen, the school board, one of the school board seats got really rough at Contingent, and they were, he's lying. It was ugly, and I was following that race too. It's a school board seat. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
It is. It's sad. And so again, Zach, how do we wrap a bow around this one?
I guess we've created this strange space in our society, among many of our strange spaces, where you can have somebody in, I don't want to say an ivory tower, but potentially the highest office of the land, and out of nowhere, a constituent can choose to essentially choose, or maybe feel compelled to, kamikaze themselves and that person. And I think that's what's happening here, right? The idea is that no matter what, at the end of the day, both of these people will have people that judge them and their families and their kids and their kids' kids forever in a way that you can't come back from. I think that leads some Democrats to think, you know what, if somebody's willing to do that, I believe them. I think that leads some Republicans to think, that's absurd. Why would anybody do that? Like, it leaves us all somewhere in the middle.
There you go. Hashtag. Guys, any final thoughts on this?
None that won't open another can of worms.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
I was about to say, I think we've done pretty good.
I've got like 4 other things that are popping off in my mind right now, and I'm not going there right now.
Exactly.
Maybe this will be the next episode. Listen, I think we'll still be talking about this next Monday. I don't see it ending.
This will be the news
how
of
many
the day,
more?
I'm sure.
Yeah, and if you listen to this show and I offended you in any way, I apologize. Again, I recognize that I cannot put myself in Dr. Ford's shoes, and I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I haven't heard her statements or testimony or read a letter. And any victim of sexual assault or assault of any kind, it's shameful. And on the other side of that too, and I can say this, I can totally understand that. I've been accused of things that I've not done in my life. Nothing that dire. But when you know something is untrue and you're being accused of it, that's hard. It's hard to deal with. And I've been accused of it in my personal life and accused of things in my business life that just were not true. And you feel like you're powerless in those situations.
It's hard to prove a negative, right?
Yeah.
You didn't do it. I mean, you can come up with all the facts to try to support your position, but at the end of the day, you can't prove you did not do something necessarily all the time. You know?
Yeah. Which is a sad state of where we are, I think, as a society now, in the way that the positives and negatives of social media and news and traveling, information. This is what you get. Man, thanks, Scott, for coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
Find Scott at Snelling's Law.
SnellingsInjuryLaw.com.
SnellingsInjuryLaw.com, or on Twitter at
Scott Snellings.
There you go. That's easy. Andrew, always appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
Zach, thank you, man.
Thanks.
All the folks here at Real News Communication. Once again, my wonderful, beautiful wife, happy 13th anniversary, honey. 13 years with me. There should be an award for that. But she's awesome, and I love her to death. And I'm sorry that this was the episode that we ended up doing on this. But anyway, thank you, Jenna. I love you. My beautiful daughters, Emerson and Arabella, love you too. Daddy loves you. And so while I may be considering a number of things, I do know where I land on this. I don't know what happened to due process in this country, but I fear that it no longer exists. Due to the ability to spread information via social media at the press of a button, or the 24-hour skewed news cycle, the ability to understand the facts prior to rendering judgment is absent in today's society. Skepticism is somehow bypassed when it comes in a short text overlaid on a picture on Twitter or Facebook. And while we always want the media to be non-biased, let's be real. They are biased, that is. They're run by humans, and humans have agendas on both sides of the political aisle. And that doesn't just go for the CNNs and Fox Newses of the world, but also for your friend or relative posting a political meme or attack on the other side from their social media site or YouTube page. That is all media, and we blindly trust it. And because information can spread at literally the speed of light, no longer do we seem to have time to presume someone is innocent, rather we immediately moved to guilty. I saw, I read, I judged. Swipe and on to the next political firestorm. It's too much data moving way too fast to ensure accuracy or credibility. And this isn't specific to the Brett Kavanaugh issue, but in every situation we live in right now. But when you add politics into the mix, it becomes much easier to allow my opinions to be influenced by the manner in which I want to receive the information I get. I'm no longer getting facts, rather skewed information via the outlet I tend to agree with. That ultimately solidifies my opinion, and that is wrong. We do need to hear what Dr. Ford has to say. Absolutely we do. But the same rules need to apply in this situation that apply in any other case of accusation. The person who gets accused of something should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And we have to give him, in this case, the same opportunity to defend himself. Before any testimony has been given, we have already had lawmakers stating that they either refuse to believe these accusations or absolutely believe them. And these are people who've taken a sworn oath to defend the Constitution, which affords innocence until guilt is proven. Again, I'm not defending sexual assault, and there is never an excuse or justification for that. However, just as we must protect the victim of assault, we must also protect the accused until guilt is proven. This is a man with a wife, with children. For all I know, is a good and decent man. I don't know him. And in the same manner, for all I know, so Dr. Ford is a good and decent woman. That's why we have the system we have. We must allow the time for due process and maintain a society where no one can just ruin someone else's life just because. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Listen. Put yourself into the innocent shoes of both parties, Dr. Ford and Mr. Kavanaugh. See this from both sides. One who was victimized by assault and or one who might be victimized by false accusation. Listen to the facts and to more than just one news source. Both sides get out of the echo chamber on this. Let's hear what Dr. Ford has to say. But let's remember not to hang Brett Kavanaugh until we've heard all of the facts. Finding myself somewhere in the middle, I'm Seth Denson.